Justin, guess what we just did?
We just went live on a new platform.
Yeah. We figured it out 5 minutes ago, so we'll see if it actually works. Justin, did I tell you that we're potentially live on Twitter as well?
Hey, there we go.
Let's talk. My name is Matt Miller. Joining me today is Justin McGovern. Justin, guess what we just did?
We just went live on a new platform.
Yeah. We figured it out 5 minutes ago, so we'll see if it actually works.
Yep,
As of
bear
right
with
now,
us.
it's not 100% working. Um, yeah, we're live. Yeah. All right. So today, we are going over the NFL draft.
Yeah, this
I
is
think,
our. This is always one of our favorite things to do each year. Um, we do a few mock drafts throughout the off season, but now it's time. It is time for us to put pen to paper and submit our final mock drafts of the year.
yeah. And for those of you who are just joining us for the first time, um, we are a show that prides ourselves on sticking up for the little guy, the underrepresented teams and whatnot of each sport. So we care about the bottom quarter of teams as much as ESPN cares about the top quarter. Um, so sit back, relax, and Justin, it's time for the NFL draft, baby.
All right, yeah, let's dive in. With the first pick in our 2025 mock drafts, I think we have a unanimous selection here. I think just about anyone that's been following along knows that the Tennessee Titans are planning to take Cam Ward. And in fact, I think Cam Ward gave it away himself the other day, saying that some of his favorite receivers in the NFL are Calvin Ridley and he mentioned Tony Pollard as his favorite running back. So
And Spears. He said the best running
yeah,
backs are Pollard and Spears.
so very clearly pointing out that he plans to be a member of the Titans. So the Titans want to operate in a very happy system. They attempted to do this with Will Levis with results that got them the number one overall pick. So now it's time for Cam Ward to step in and get this team going, really.
Yeah, I think it's unanimous just because like the QB position is such an important position. And Cam Ward has come a long way. He's shown that he can be an elite passer. It remains to be seen what he can do in the NFL, obviously, but um, the reason why he's going number one is even after the season ended, he's taken huge strides in showing what he can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, pick number two seems to be somewhat unanimous at this point. I've seen a lot of people going this route as well, but Travis Hunter, um, two-way weapon. It remains to be seen if he goes both ways. But I mean, the Browns would be stupid not to let him at first,
Yeah.
because he said he would rather retire than not to play both positions. So we'll see what can what he can do in Cleveland. I don't like him going to Cleveland. Growing up in Cincinnati, it's like every great player seems to always go to um, Cleveland, Baltimore, and Pittsburgh. So it's rather annoying that yet another elite talent that isn't going to miss is going number two to the Browns. But Justin,
Yeah, I think we have a great deal of confidence on this pick. I think a lot of people, even just a few weeks ago, were mocking different players here, and I felt good about Travis Hunter going here. He will be a top talent receiver for them and a top corner as well. So it's gonna be fascinating to see what he does at the next level. This is going to be very intriguing.
yeah. Um,
I
oh,
think
I
we
guess
both
you're up for
yeah
three.
we both are anonymous here. I think at the next pick as well.
No, we're not.
Um, oh, we're not.
No.
Okay, so with the third pick of my 2025 mock draft, I have the Giants going best player available, taking Abdul Carter here. When we remember the Giants being very good, a long time back, it was because their defensive line was really strong. Carter is the best player in the class. It makes sense for them to just go with that here. I thought about, maybe they could try to look for a quarterback or, try to address their woeful offensive line. But ultimately, I think the value of getting Carter at 3 is just too much to pass up.
Yeah. Um, Justin, did I tell you that we're potentially live on Twitter as well?
Hey, there we go. Shout out.
Trying out new things. The I don't think Abdul Carter to the Giants is bad, but looking at their roster, they already have two really good edge rushers. Neither of them are like big enough to be moved inside more. So I think that they're going to pass up Abdul Carter, um, which I think is dumb at the same time. But I think they go Will Campbell. You can't really go wrong with either. Will Campbell is a stud tackle, and they need blocking so bad.
Yeah.
Um, so I think they go Will Campbell. Maybe this is too obvious of a move to better their team. Um, but yeah, Will Campbell, I have him going to the Giants and being a stud on that offensive line. So then I have Abdul Carter going to the New England Patriots. And big need. Um, Vrabel is a defensive guy. He needs a big name edge rusher. I think this is a steal for the Patriots.
Yeah, they will be rushing up to the stage to submit this pick if Abdul Carter is still available. In my case, he was not. We've been seeing that the Patriots want to help protect Drake May, address the offensive line. So I have them going with Will Campbell here to do just that.
Yeah. I mean, they need both, really.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think addressing, protecting your franchise quarterback is going to be a huge deal for them. And that's why I think, other than Carter, Will Campbell might be number 2 on the Patriots board.
Yeah.
It'll remain to be seen, but I'm very very intrigued by that. Now we're getting to an interesting part of this draft where I think the top 4 kind of seem to be falling into place. I think a lot of people know what's going to happen there. But next is the Jacksonville Jaguars, and this team is a huge range. I've seen so many players mocked as this team. And really I just had to think about, what does this franchise usually look for? Um, and then, Membu out of Missouri, I think fits that. This team likes those workout warrior players. And, ever since the combine, and even a little bit before, there's kind of a preemptive pre combine. People were like, this guy's probably going to test well. He's going to move the boards. Then the combine hit and he moved up even further. This is the kind of workout warrior that we tend to see the Jaguars go with, and that's why I have him pinpointed to this spot.
And other than the last two picks, I'm in agreement on this one as well. I had fiddled with a few other picks, but offensive tackle is by far the biggest need. Um, if they want to look at making the playoffs again, they need some blocking, and Mimbo can do that. He's so good. But starting right here, it's wide open. The
Yeah.
first four are unanimous going for top four. Um, I think I'm the only one that doesn't have Abdul Carter going to the Giants. Uh, but whatever. I figured that they would want to better their team instead of just bettering their defense. Um, but the Jaguars, if they want to hang on to Trevor Lawrence, they're gonna need a stud offensive tackle. Everything that they have on the offensive line did not work out last year.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I agree because you're entering a position here. You've paid this guy, and you're starting to see him get hurt more. You're starting to see him regress because he has rushed decisions. You know, this offseason may very well be the last chance the Jaguars have to salvage this situation.
yeah. Um, Moving on to the Las Vegas Raiders. Um, I have them taking Will Johnson. I have had him mocked here forever, and it seems like people had him mocked there for a little bit, and then for whatever reason, he keeps moving down the board, and I just don't get it. Will Johnson is a freak athlete and will definitely make this defense stand out. And in my opinion, he's the best player available. Also,
Yeah, yeah. I think some teams are starting to kind of overthink it potentially with him. We'll see if the Raiders are one of them, but some of his testing numbers weren't quite what I think teams expected. But I mean, turn on the tape and you can see this guy can play. And I thought about what again because really how you have to really think about this year's draft is, what does the team tend to look for? What does the team usually look at? In this case here, we have a new crop of people, but Pete Carroll's the head coach. He's going to have a heavy influence on what's going on here. Tall, lanky corners like Will Johnson fit the defense that he's going to want to have. So that's why I went Will Johnson here.
yeah. Um, you're the Jets.
Yeah, yeah. So on sorry, I forget about the alternating sometimes.
Mm.
But yeah, so the Jets, I really tossed around the idea of Kelvin Banks here, addressing the offensive line. My only problem with that is, they drafted an offensive lineman last year. So are they going to go back to back? I don't know if that's entirely likely, especially because they don't seem to have a true plan on offense. I think, new defensive minded head coach, Aaron Glenn, maybe they look into the trenches here, look for someone that can help them stop the run in particular. And that's Mason Graham out of Michigan.
Yeah, I agree. I think Mason Graham is going to be a stud. Um, and they're going to get back to the old way of doing defense, stopping the run, and then having the Sauce Gardner clean it all up in the back end. Um, this is what they were known for in like 2010, and I think they're going to get back to that identity because obviously they can't get it figured out on the offense, so they're going to need a stud defense. But
Honestly, their defense even started just a few years ago, and then it kind of fell off a little bit.
um, yeah, I don't understand why they fell off when they had a lot of the same players, but whatever. Um, Moving on to the Carolina Panthers. I They have a lot of needs on defense. I'm gonna go with Malachi Starks. He's a really good safety. They need a safety so bad. He's been flying up draft boards, um, and I think that he can be a difference maker. I can't remember the last time a safety was drafted in the top 10, but he's definitely going to change that.
I don't know. I don't think we agree on this one, Matt. I looked at the Panthers' needs. What do NFL teams tend to address out of those needs? I think first and foremost, you know, they need needs. They need players all on all levels of defense, but they especially need a pass rush, and that's where Jalen Walker comes into play. I've been torn between him and Michael Williams. I think I had Michael Williams in my previous mock, but I think Walker is starting to kind of fly up boards a little bit. We'll see if I fell victim to lying season. But I think it's between the two Georgia players, and ultimately, I had the Panthers going Walker here. I just, I see them going at the pass rush. Yes, they have a need of safety, but I think a lot of teams are under the attitude that we can address safety later on. We saw safety get really deprioritized in the last few years. We had last offseason where safeties got cut en masse from all sorts of NFL rosters and had to take a pay cut. So, while Starks is very talented, we may see him fall just simply because of his position.
Maybe. We'll see. Defensive tackle tends to drop pretty far too. So we could be wrong about Mason Graham also.
Yeah, yeah, it's entirely possible. But moving on to the Saints here, this is an interesting one because the Derek Carr situation came up. They now are in desperate need of a quarterback. They have a lot of other needs as well. There is a chance with this team that they could straight up just ride it out with Spencer Rattler. And if you do that, you're almost setting yourself up perfectly to get Arch Manning next year. That is something that might be on the front office's mind. With that, level of caution out of the way, I'm not sure if that's the route they're going to go. I think they do address the quarterback position this year and get Shador Sanders in the fold to be their franchise quarterback.
Well, guess what, Justin? I agree with you. Um, we did not talk about this pick until I sent over my stuff to him. And he already had his done. So it's really funny that we both had Shador Sanders going here and reacted to the news accordingly. Because you can't go with what's his name from
Spencer
Oklahoma?
Rattler.
Yeah. Well, it was at Oklahoma, then went to South Carolina. But you can't go with Spencer Rattler for an entire season. Like he's a solid backup, but he's not really going to get you anywhere. You need a long term
Except for
option,
the number one pick.
maybe.
Get Arch.
Hey, I didn't even think about that. That's interesting. Maybe this whole thing is concocted just to do that. But I do think Shador Sanders would be pretty good down in New Orleans. Um, I mean, they have some good young receivers. You can pick up a couple younger receivers later in the draft as well that can um, like help him out. Um, maybe you can even get uh, the younger Horn, Jimmy Horn, put him in his dad's shoes.
Yeah.
Um, but moving down to the Chicago Bears, I'm not falling into the Genti hype. I think there's other key positions that need to be addressed, and I think one of them is offensive line. They need to shore up that offensive line if they want Caleb Williams to be successful. If you go with another skill player, like yes, I have Ashton Genty higher on my rankings than Kelvin Banks, but I think Kelvin Banks is a good fit because I think that he can play tackle. He can move. You can move him inside to guard. You can put him where you want, and he'll succeed. Um, and I think this is a good key to success, even though it does seem like Ben Johnson has a vendetta against DeAndre Swift. So we'll see if that comes to play later. But um, whoever they have running the ball, they're going to need some linemen as well. So to me, Kelvin Banks is a good pick here.
I'm happy with how they address the offensive line in free agency and with their trades. I think they shored up what they needed to. And instead of chasing it with the draft, they went and got some vets in there who are going to, at the very least, provide them very solid play. I think this is going to be the best Bears offensive line we've seen in some time. So that kind of
It's not saying
positions
much.
them. Yes, it's not, but I think they'll be at least decent. Um, so that positions him for Genti here. I think you get a difference maker like him in the backfield. You take the pressure off of Caleb Williams and the pass game. You get Genti in there to pretty much run the ball. Get something similar to what the Detroit Lions have going on, because that's what Ben Johnson wants to install. And this offense, just watch it go. I'm very intrigued by that. I think I don't see Genti going much lower than this. So, watch out for him here. This is where, this is where I have him going. Moving on to the 49ers, um, I think there's a lot of needs, which is kind of weird for a team that just was in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, but here we are. They had to make a lot of cuts this offseason to get under the cap. A lot of guys are aging. They may have missed that initial Super Bowl window they were in. But, how can you work your way back there? They need a pass rush outside Nick Bosa. He's the only one that's really providing that. They lost a lot of the other guys they used to have as running mates up there. So time to bring in Shamar Stewart. Time to bring in Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M to come in there and get back to terrorizing quarterbacks.
Yeah, I agree with the position. I just disagree with the player. Um, in my um, mock draft, if I can pull it up here, Jalen Walker is still available. So I think that you could put him in a few different spots at linebacker, but in this case, I think that they're going to put him at edge, and I think he's going to succeed. Um, if they can have two stud edge rushers, Justin, they can get after the quarterback. And you know what happens when you get after the quarterback? You tend to win football games.
Sure do.
So 49ers looking to get back into the thick of things. Um, but moving on to their 90s rival, the Dallas Cowboys. This is where I have Ashton Genty going. Still seems like peanut butter and jelly. Ashton Genty grew up in Dallas, was a Cowboys fan, goes to the Cowboys. It just seems like a match made in heaven. Yes, they need receiver. Yes, they need some things on the line, but Dak's going to need some help. And their run game last year was atrocious.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, they so badly need a running back. And, a lot of it was, simply put, they didn't have the backs. I mean, obviously, Ezekiel Elliott was very, very old and washed up, and they forced him the ball for much of the year with no success. I don't think, we would be talking more about Marion Hampton if it wasn't for Ashton Genty in this class.
yeah,
Hampton is
stud.
also one of the best running backs we've seen in a long time. Kind of reminds me of when Jameer Gibbs is in the same class as Bijan Robinson. Gibbs got kind of overlooked, and except for the Detroit Lions, who took him, people thought it was a little bit high at the time, but he's proven to really be dynamic to that offense. I think the Cowboys, they are Genty's floor, but with Genty off the board, I think they go to their next guy, which is Omarion Hampton.
It does seem like I like Hampton a lot. I do think he will succeed in the NFL. I just think it's a little bit of a reach, but it does seem like a Cowboys move in the draft.
Next is the Miami Dolphins. This one's a hard one. You know, Um, I feel like the Dolphins could really go a lot of different places, and we don't really ever seem to get a real trend about what they're going to do. Ultimately, Calvin Banks is still on the board. You need to protect Tua because you're entering a very dangerous spot with his career. Any more hits and you might lose him. You know, Concussions are a serious issue.
Yes.
So, you've got to protect him. Even when he was healthy, the offense didn't operate the same because he was, under too much pressure. So, Kelvin Banks, I think, is the solution here.
And I agree with the offensive line. It's clearly their weakness. Although they're on fire sale mode right now, looking to get rid of Jalen Ramsey and Tyreek Hill. But doesn't matter if you're trading those guys, you still got to protect Tyler Booker, in my opinion, since Kelvin Banks has already taken. Tyler Booker is the next best offensive lineman, and their interior offensive line may be one of the worst in the NFL. So just getting a guy in the middle to shore it all up is going to be so helpful. And to me, Tyler Booker is that guy to do that. But moving on to the Indianapolis Colts. Justin, do you know what one of the weaknesses of the Colts last year was?
They didn't have a tight end.
Do you know what else?
Well, offensive line and
No, no,
passing
not
department.
who they need. What their weakness was.
Oh, they couldn't pass it.
They couldn't. They had zero red zone capabilities.
Oh,
Adding Tyler Warren to the mix is going to save Anthony Richardson's career. Um, I think it's pretty apparent that we are. I'll take it on the head. I said Anthony Richardson was going to be a really good quarterback. It's turning out to be the opposite. If the Colts want anybody to be successful at quarterback, they're going to want somebody else to throw to, especially in the red zone. You already have a couple weapons, so even if it doesn't work out with Richardson, some other guy is going to come into a pretty stacked offense. So Tyler Warren, the second best tight end in the draft, will be going to the Indianapolis Colts.
I said that Anthony Richardson was a big risk. um, I feel like unless somehow both guys are off the board, this pick really comes down to two players. Tyler Warren, like you said, or I think higher on their board is Tyler Booker, out of Alabama. He will address a huge need on the inside of the offensive line. The run game was really something that the Colts specialized in the last time that they were truly good, which was a few years ago. Um, they still have Jonathan Taylor here. They still have some of the pieces, but they just need that offensive line to get back to playing at a high level to improve again. So that's why I have Booker going here. And in the Atlanta Falcons, they have needed a pass rush for such a long time. I mean, pretty much ever since they blew that lead in the Super Bowl to the Patriots, they have needed a pass rush.
I mean, they've had Grady
Getting
Jarrett, but it's not the same.
Yeah, and now he's gone as
Yeah.
well. So Michael Williams out of Georgia, guy from nearby, kind of fits this hole perfectly. It feels like a really good fit.
I am having some technical difficulties over here. I agree with the position. I mean, it's apparent that they need to pass rush. Uh, but I have Shamar Stewart going here. He's a stud. Seems like a really good fit. Um, Falcons have to go edge, right? I mean, it doesn't matter who they get. They got to go edge, right?
Absolutely.
Um, Speaking of um, defensive line, I think the Arizona Cardinals go defensive line, and to me, Derek Harmon is one of the best defensive tackles in the draft, and I think that he's actually being underrated right now. Watching him play in college, it was like this dude just kind of seemed like a top 10 pick. He was just so explosive, such a good run stopper, too. So, and that's a big hole that they have. They can't stop the run worth anything. So, slowly but surely, this team is coming back around after not even just taking it down to the studs. They took every screw out of every board and took that thing down to the ground and are
Except for
building it
Kyler
back up,
Murray.
except for Kyler Murray. Um, and I think with a couple more pieces, we could start seeing a dangerous Arizona Cardinals team. And I think this is a good start for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we agree on the position, agree on the analysis, but different player. Kenneth Grant is someone who is very high on some teams' boards. I'm going to take a guess that maybe the Cardinals are one of them. He hasn't quite had the production in college, but teams are really high on him as a player. In fact, some teams think that he could go higher than Mason Graham, the other Michigan defensive tackle. So that'll be very interesting to kind of monitor and see what goes on. I think we both could end up being really wrong if Grant goes higher than him. Um, Ultimately, I think this ends up being a pretty good value for the Cardinals here at 16 for the exact same reasons you said, addressing, stopping the run and, you know, getting another key piece to that defense. Now we look at our hometown team here, the Cincinnati Bengals. Um, this is where they go with Mike Green out of Marshall. They need to address the pass rush no matter whether Trey Hendrickson is with the team or not. Either you're giving him a running mate to get after quarterbacks, or you're drafting your top guy here. Whatever you're doing, Mike Green is the guy for the Bengals. He is a stud. It's proof once again you do not need. We saw 1,000 guys hit the portal today, but guess what? You might be making a mistake because you don't need to do that. You can go to Marshall. You can stay there all 4 years with a coaching staff that cares about developing you, and get in the first round of the draft, and then succeed in the NFL. I think the Bengals could end up with their version of Mitchell to the Eagles last year.
Yes. I think Mike Green is a fantastic player. I think he's going to be really good in the NFL. I think this is a fantastic pick. It's really funny that we both had the same pick, despite not having Mike Green going here at all in any of our previous mock drafts and not talking to each other about it. It just seems perfect for both guys, right? Like both Mike Green and the Bengals. The Bengals are underrated. Mike Green is underrated. I think Mike Green has a chance to go way higher than this, but I do think that the Bengals need somebody opposite Hendrickson. Even if they don't get a deal worked out and they have to ship Hendrickson off, they need to have a pass rusher, regardless if he stays or goes. And I think he's a good building block. He kind of reminds me a little of what Justin Smith was back in
Hmm.
2001, coming out of college. So I think Bengals get a steal here at 17. Um, Moving on to the Seattle Sea guys, um, getting rid of DK Metcalf may or may not be the best move that they've ever done. Um, I don't. I think they made the right move, not giving him what 150 million, whatever he got.
Whatever ungodly number that was.
Yeah. Um, so to replace him, I think there's an even better receiver that they can get, and I always butcher his first name,
Tetaroa McMillan.
Tetaroa McMillan. Um, Tall, lanky guy with hands, and that's exactly what they need. Um, I think putting Sam Darnold in a position to succeed is going to be both beneficial for both the team and him. Um, Kind of reminds me of Justin Jefferson, but with like 5 more inches of height.
Well, I think McMillan, the Seahawks are a good landing spot for him. But in this case, Tyler Warren's still on the board. And without a doubt, if he's on the board, the Seahawks are taking
They have
him.
to.
They need a tight end. Warren is, I mean, they really need, weapons in general, but Tyler Warren is the best weapon available at this point. So that's where he ends up landing with the Seahawks. The Seahawks finally give themselves a stud tight end they've been waiting on for quite some time now. But,
Since the
you know,
downfall of Jimmy Graham.
yeah, yeah, since then. We move on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jade Barron is still on the board. The Buccaneers badly need to address their secondary. So, this is another perfect fit. Barron is one of the best players on the board at this point and gives him a top tier corner again. I really badly want to mock Siobhan Rivell out of East Carolina here to get the Pirates to Buccaneers thing going, but with Barron on the board, I just could not do it. Um, but great pick for the Buccaneers to kind of continue to improve their secondary, a piece that's been kind of holding them back from hitting the next level.
Yeah, I agree with the secondary, but I have to change my graphic. You
We're all
guys can't
catching
see
on.
what
It's
I see.
okay.
Nick Emenwari is such a good defensive back. Huge reason why South Carolina was so good last year. in like half their games and got screwed out of the other half. Um, that's a story for a different show. But Buccaneers need to keep this train going and need to add some youth into that secondary. And Emin Worry is one of those guys that can make this happen. I mean, Bucks are just a couple pieces away from possibly making it to the Super Bowl and making the Browns look foolish for trying to ruin Baker Mayfield. Um, moving on, the Denver Broncos. Luther Burden III to Denver just seems right like the right fit. They need a good, solid receiver to go along with that offense. Um, it's a tough division. A lot of these teams in that division have been upgrading their defenses. You're going to want to go with another receiver to start attacking another corner. Um, Luther Burden, I'm a little surprised that he's fallen this far. Going into last season, he looked like he was like a top 10 pick. Um, so we'll see, but definitely think they need a receiver.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Outside Cortland Sutton, they kind of lacked options. They just need to take the best pass catching weapon available. And I was very torn on what that is for the Broncos. I did not consider McMillan here. I've seen him as a popular pick, but McMillan is kind of the same receiver that Cortland Sutton is, so he doesn't bring a new threat. You know, are you going to look for a good route runner like Luther Burden, or are you going to go with the speed guy and Matthew Golden? Been very torn on what this looks like for them. In the end, I end up going with Golden. Sean Payton, I think, would be very intrigued by his speed, and that's why he goes to the Broncos here.
Oh, this is a neat feature.
Hey, look at that.
uh,
We're learning on the fly here, guys. We're having
yeah.
fun. Um, yeah, next we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. They still need to address the offense. I'm assuming they're going to sign Aaron Rodgers. I think, it's just a matter of days or whenever he comes back from his next vision quest and decides to sign with them. But I think that's ultimately going to happen. So, get another weapon in there and really help this offense move. Um, I know they have DK in there, but man, the Steelers just love their tall receivers. Um, I kind of contradicts what I said about the Broncos pick, but you know, I the Steelers are kind of a different animal than the Broncos are. I could see Sean Payton being the kind of guy that wants to get a speed guy. The Steelers, on the other hand, you know, Rust Belt country. We want those big, tall guys who are going to get come down with passes in the end zone.
I do agree with Aaron Rodgers, but I think um, they have what they want on offense. I think they can address offensive line. To me, there's not really another offensive lineman around here. They would have to trade back if they want offensive line. So I think that they're gonna go defense and just keep hammering this thing home. That defense is their identity. Walter Nolan falls to the Steelers, and I think that it's just another added piece to stop runs while TJ Watt does his thing on the edge, um, and just keep loading that thing up.
Yeah,
Plus,
that's
Cam
a
Hayward's getting old, so he can't really do it by himself.
yeah, that's a dangerous pick. I think that's a really good one for them.
Yeah. Um, the Los Angeles Chargers, I had a bunch of different picks here, but it just seems like Colston Loveland is just going to go stay with Jim Harbaugh forever. Um, they also need a tight end so bad. The Chargers were also a team that was really bad in the red zone last year. Um, I think this can be one of the final few pieces to get this thing going, but they also need offensive line. They need to make their defense younger. They got so many old guys on the defense. Um, but I think adding a tight end as a weapon is underrated in the NFL, and I think Colson can be a good pick for them.
I've noticed this has been very popular, almost too popular. I thought, this seems almost too perfect. Guy goes and ends up playing for his former college coach. I feel like it's a very popular mock idea that doesn't happen as often as you would think. Plus, there's another factor here. Derek Harmon is still on the board, and I think Harbaugh is offended by how their interior defensive line played last year. So I cannot imagine him passing up addressing the trenches on this one with Harmon on the board. They got to get him, get after the teams in their division. Again, very loaded division. So yeah, Harmon ends up being a steal for them at this point. And then, because we decide to go on a run of defensive tackles here comes the Green Bay Packers. They need a defensive tackle as well. Walter Nolan, one of the best players on the board at this point, he fills a need. You know, um, this is a bit of a this is a challenging spot to predict in general. I feel like it's very hard to predict what the Packers are going to do. They tend to surprise us every year, but I think this is a reasonable pick for them.
I agree. I think if no one's already taken in my mock draft, um, so I do have them addressing the defensive line, but I think they need a better pass rush. Michael
Mm.
Williams is somehow fallen this far in my mock draft, and I think he would be a steal here for them, and I think he would be a great fit, and just start making that defense kind of mean.
Yeah, yeah, that's a steal at this point.
Um, One thing about the Minnesota Vikings in the same division is they also need defense. Um, Making sure that uh, they take some of the pressure off of JJ McCarthy, they need to be able to stop the passes, like stop the other team from passing. And I think Jade Barron is going to do that. I think he's going to be a really good cover corner. And I think it's a really good fit. I think this defense is starting to come together and starting to become a little scary, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, it's been looking pretty good lately, which is why I'm kind of thinking everyone kind of forgets how their season ended. Um, Sam Darnold got thrown around like a sack of potatoes at the end of the year. Just, I mean, their offensive line couldn't even operate against the Rams in that playoff game. I, I'm very surprised most people have forgotten this, but I have not shaken the memory of that. So they need to go off the line here. Gray Zabel from North Dakota State is a dog, and he's from the region, so they know him well, and he is someone that could go offensive tackle or inside, whatever the Vikings feel they could use him the best. But someone that can help them run the ball better and don't let your quarterback get sacked like 9 times in the playoff game.
Yeah, that was ridiculous.
Yeah, I think a lot of people got to go to bed early that night.
Yeah.
There's mentioning a quarterback getting sacked way too many times to end the playoff game. CJ Stroud got sacked like 8 times against the Kansas City Chiefs. They were close to winning that game if it wasn't for that. Um, they invested a lot into the offensive line last year, so it was very surprising to see it fall off completely. But they have cut bait on a lot of guys. They're kind of starting over. They need to prioritize the tackles. Get Josh Simmons in here, big old meteor man, and
Bigger
get
meteor
this
man.
off the line back going again.
I actually disagree with you. I think what the Bengals have started here is linking up receivers that are familiar with quarterbacks. And who's more familiar for CJ Stroud? Emeka Ibuka. Getting rid of Stephon Diggs really wasn't that big of a loss, just because I don't think Stephon Diggs was that same player that he had been in years past.
Yeah,
And I think taking a similar guy, but with more of a let me just run this slant real quick and catch whatever you throw to me. I think Emeka Ibuka is going to be really good in the NFL if he goes to the right place, and I think if he goes to the Texans, he can be that guy. I think with Emeka Ibuka, this offense is going to be scary. Yes, they need to address the offensive line, but you got rid of a big problem,
Yeah.
your offensive line coach. um, and I think giving CJ Stroud more weapons isn't ever going to hurt things. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. And Abuka is like he's like a scary Terry clone almost.
yeah.
Very similar Ohio State career where he was never the guy, always overshadowed by the guy, but he was there. He was always there. He was always going to run the right route, be in the right place, be that safety net for the quarterback. So CJ Stroud is going to be very happy to have that if your pick is correct.
Oh yeah. You know who else is going to be really happy for this next pick? Matthew Stafford. Um, Matthew getting Matthew Golden. I think the Rams getting another receiver wouldn't hurt either. Um, I know they have Devonte Adams, which a lot of people actually forget that he's there. Um, and then they're gonna cut ties with Cooper Cup. They have Puka Nakua, but you add a third weapon. Matthew Stafford really hasn't had a big third weapon ever. Like
Not often, no.
his third weapons were guys who when they left they didn't do much. I think adding Matthew Golden to this not only solidifies their receiving core for years to come, but gives this offense maybe another weapon to get past the Eagles. Because if you remember, they were driving at the end of the game, and they
They
were
were so close.
they were a Matthew Stafford little bit of an overthrow away from moving on. Adding Matthew Golden may be able to help with that.
Potentially. However, here's one reason. One reason I disagree with your pick is they do have Adams and um why does his name escape me? He's so
Puka,
good. Puka Nakua in the fold. Thank you for the reminder on that one. Puka's a stud. I'm sorry, I briefly had a brain fart on his name. You have those guys in there. That means you don't need to address it with a first round pick. I think you can address it later on, which by the way, don't forget the Rams have been pretty dang good at. They got Nakua late in the draft. When they got Cooper Cup late in the draft, they are very good at scouting receivers and finding guys in the fifth round who come out of nowhere to be studs. So I don't think they're going to be rushed to address that position here. Instead, they look at the defense, maybe best player available because, they're just trying to make this last run in the Super Bowl here. They badly need a linebacker. Jihad Campbell is a stud of a player. The only reason why he falls this far down the draft is just because teams aren't going to heavily prioritize a coverage linebacker. So, that's why he drops. He drops because of his position, not because of the player that he is. So, best player available for the Rams here to help them, try to make that next step. And then the Baltimore Ravens, similar kind of move. Most teams don't really consider safety a high priority. That's why, I have safeties a lot lower in my mock draft than basically anyone else. Um, because I just don't think teams are thinking about that position anymore. But the Baltimore Ravens are a team that really does love those guys back there. That is a huge priority for their defense because they love to be aggressive, so they need a guy in the back end who can really keep it all together. They're gonna love that Malachi Starks fell to them here. They're gonna rush to the podium and get that pick in. So that would definitely be a dangerous pick for the Ravens defense.
I think that Jihad Campbell is a better addition to this defense. Um,
That's a good one too.
I think Patrick Queen leaving and going to Pittsburgh was a huge loss for them. Um, I think they need to replace him, and who better than Jihad Campbell, who's a very similar player. Um, Plus, I think he would be like, I think he could be like a captain long term, uh, like once he ages into it. But the Ravens, they can't get past the hump, not because their offense, but because of their defense. And what's funny is their defense isn't even that bad. Their
Yeah.
defense is actually pretty good, but their defense just folds in the playoffs, and they have to address that. And you got to find the weaknesses in your season and shore them up that way. And their weakness was passing over the middle. Jihad Campbell can stop that. Um, moving
You know
on
the
to
Ravens love those Alabama linebackers.
They do. They love those Alabama linebackers. Moving on to the Detroit Lions. The biggest need of all, you can go guard here, you can go a few other things, but the biggest need of all, they need another pass rusher. It was very evident that as soon as Hutchinson went down, they didn't have anybody. James Pierce is available, and James Pierce is going to make it happen in Detroit. He's a work it out, grind it kind of guy, not from the Rust Belt, but from the South. And I think that he has the size and build to when you pair him with Aiden Hutchinson, it's going to be a scary duo.
Yeah, I echo the sentiments of the Lions pick. I agree 100%, but I have a different player here. I said during the entire Ohio State playoff run that Jack Sawyer is a future Detroit Lion. He is that Rust Belt kind of guy that this team looks for. I think they've had him pegged here. I've refused to change this pick. I have steadfastly kept the Lions with him this entire draft process, and I see no reason to change that. I don't care what the combine said or whatever, but Sawyer is, we saw the plays he made in the playoff. We know he's a dog. I know that Motor City Dan Campbell was watching too, and he loves getting those Rust Belt defensive ends. Aiden Hutchinson was successful. Now get another guy who's kind of a similar player, on the other side, and just watch it work. Then we look at the Washington Commanders. This team just was the surprise of the NFL. They really caught the league by storm. Jaden Daniels is a stud, and he worked really without that much receiver help. He had Scary Terry, a few other guys who made plays here and there. Um, so now they need that number two guy. They need another top guy. Um, Luther Burden has fallen to them here, and I think they are going to snatch it up in a heartbeat. I know Burden kind of fell throughout this draft process. Teams were not happy with his 2024 season was not as good as 2023. There was points where he kind of when Brady Cook got hurt, he kind of mailed it in and got frustrated. So that's why teams kind of docked him a little bit. I don't think the Commanders are too concerned about that. He'll be happy to play with Jaden Daniels, and he'll be ready to go.
I think that the Commanders have never really addressed the edge rushing position since they started just selling off every edge rusher that they had. Um, Nick Scorton is going to be a really good player here, and I think he would be a really good fit for the Commanders. Not only is he a solid run stopper, but he gets after the quarterback as well. So a good kind of two-way um, edge rusher there. But moving on to the Buffalo Bills, um, I think they have a few holes. I think they're a few pieces away from being able to beat the refs, but I think being able to stop, like, even if they're able to get past um, the Chiefs and make it to the Super Bowl, assuming the Eagles make it back, they're going to have to stop the run somehow. And I think they know that. I know they have Ed Oliver, but Ed Oliver gets double teamed. There's no way you're going to double team Tyleik Williams and um, Ed Oliver. I think Tyleik Williams is just a man and can throw some people around. I think outside of Ed Oliver, they're a little thin. I know they got Larry Ogunjobi and Daquan Jones, but
Yeah, and Ogunjobi is suspended for 6 games.
yeah. So I think the best option for them is to make sure that nobody can run on them.
Yeah, that's a good pick, and that's something that I very much was thinking about. Either way, we know the Buffalo Bills have to address the defense outside of a litany of terrible spots against the Chiefs that led to the NFL changing the rules once again. Um, Seems like that always happens when the Bills get screwed against them. I'm tired of that pattern. The other issue was the defense was just awful, absolutely horrible in the playoffs. In years past, you could use injuries as an excuse, but not this year. They were relatively healthy back there and still just could not get the stops. And I think the main culprit of that was the secondary. Now obviously I did just mention they were mostly healthy. Christian Benford got hurt against the Chiefs, and they had no one behind them that was ready to be at all capable of stopping anything. So that's one part, and then also in general, they just need another guy in the secondary. So Trey Amos, I think, fills the need here. I was very, very torn between him and Williams since both were on the board. Next, the Kansas City Chiefs. Um, I wanted to look at an offensive lineman here, but there, I don't know, there weren't that many available that kind of necessarily fit the range. I looked at who's on the board, and I think they see James Pierce as a nice steal at this point. So that's where the Chiefs go with this pick. Someone else to make their pass rush even more frustrating to go up against.
Yeah, I James Pierce is off the board for me. So Josh Simmons falls mainly because there was other team needs for a lot of the teams ahead of the Chiefs. But the Chiefs land a guy. Now here's a guy, to quote Chris Collinsworth. The Chiefs tackles were awful. They get early starts every play. Um, then all of a sudden the playoffs come and they don't get called for it. If they want to continue their run of near dominance in the NFL, they're going to want to take a guy like Josh Simmons. He's a bigger, meatier man, and even though the like Ohio State had some really good players on the offensive line and really good depth, you could tell that there was a missing presence on that offensive line when Simmons came out. Um,
Absolutely.
so Simmons is going to make this team good for a little bit longer. Um, but the Philadelphia Eagles, um, they have had a few pieces leave their in this offseason. You win a championship, you have guys who want to go get more money. Don't blame them at all. You have the ring, now go get your money. One of the biggest needs and one of the most important positions on this team is guard. Um, they lost Becton this offseason. If they want to continue to run the tush push, they're going to want to get a good guy. And Gray Zabel is a good guy. I think if he was on any other team other than North Dakota State, if he went FBS, he would be much higher on this list. But because he went to North Dakota State, I think that's kind of what hinders him a little bit. Um, just like all the other North Dakota State players outside of Carson Wentz. Um, but I think Zabel very capable in this offense and can make this offense just as scary as it was last year.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, for me, value wasn't there on the offensive line, so I looked to the defensive line. Tyleek Williams fell to them here. A great way. They love to address the trenches either way. Lost a few guys up there, especially in the interior. So why not go and, when you see Williams sitting there, go ahead and grab him and keep this thing going.
Yeah. So
That's our
that
2025 mock draft.
that's all she wrote. Justin, you're coming a little in a little fuzzy there.
Yeah, no. I'm gonna keep working on the lighting in this room, or a different room. We'll see,
Ooh,
but
ooh.
eventually.
I'll probably sit here, even though this chair is super uncomfortable. Um, I don't know if I can do 4 hours here, but we'll see. Next
Yeah,
week,
no.
next week is our 4 hour live event of the NFL draft. No, we did not get to go this year. We did get invited. Bummer that it didn't work out. So we will be either sitting on our couch or sitting right here. I'll have it on this half of the screen for me, and I'll be watching and letting you all know what is picked. Justin will be browsing Twitter, and we have a slew of guests coming in. We are super excited for this event. This is our big event every single year. So excited for it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Follow us at Updog Sports Talk on
Matt, you're forgetting one thing.
what?
Our special moment here of this show, our first ever giveaway.
Oh yeah. How could I forget? Justin, you want to tell us more?
Yeah. So we have here, um, basically what happened was at my real job last week, some guy wanted to advertise me. I think you'll learn throughout the summer that I seem to be pretty lucky about the some of the stuff I get at my real job. I apparently going to be in the suite for a Reds game later this year as well. So it's a gift that keeps on giving, pretty much. This guy was trying to advertise me and get my attention by sending me a Bowling Green hat, which of course did get my attention. I was like, wow, this is really cool. But I have a few Bowling Green hats already, and I realized, this is a great opportunity to, because we are Bowling Green alums here, and I want to spread the love of Bowling Green football, basketball, or any other sports out there. So, I decided, what, let's do a giveaway. So with that, everyone that has completed the requirements for this giveaway is on the screen here. A few good friends of our show are on this list. And actually, get ready to keep some of these names in mind because they'll be joining us next week. Some of them. So yeah, let's. And again, this is a random spinning wheel. So even though they're joining us, if they happen to win, it's up to chance. So um, let's count down here, Matt. Give me a little countdown, and I'll hit the wheel here and determine who is going to be getting this awesome Bowling Green hat.
Hold on. Hold on. It's just spinning at that agonizing pace. You did not time that up at all.
Not great timing there. And yeah,
Riley.
congratulations to Riley. He is an Appalachian State fan that we've gotten to know this week, but his parents went to Bowling Green, so shout out to him. Um, I'll get in touch with you soon, Riley, and congratulations on this amazing prize.
So
Man, it's so great to have a soundboard now.
I know this is fantastic. I don't think I would be able to get anything done. Um, like I don't know why I am the one with the power of doing this.
Yeah, we will continue to tweak things and kind of figure it out because um you know I, yeah, that's me with technology right there. But if I can be in charge of the soundboard next week, you better believe when the pick is happening, there will be a sound effect. That's it. You
Yep.
found the sound effect.
Yes, I did. There's also this one. Hold on, I have to keep hitting the X to do it. I like the other one better.
Yeah, I like the first one better.
Yeah. So that is the show. Justin, if you want to stop sharing for a moment before I kick you out of here. Um, follow us at Updog Sports Talk on everything. Instagram, X, where we do all of our updates. Facebook, Twitter, we already said that. TikTok, Threads. Find us on Apple Podcasts, um, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube Music. Obviously, we're live on YouTube right now, so you can find us here Wednesdays at 8. Except for next Wednesday, we will be on our live draft show, our draft special. We are super excited for this. You don't even know. We'll just keep bringing it up until you watch it. And then, yeah, tell a friend about us. We're always trying to spread um, equality from pick 1 to pick 32. We may have our personal opinions thrown in every now and then, but we try to keep it consistent. Um, Other than that, Justin, you got anything else?
No, that's all. Yeah. Congratulations again to Riley on winning this hat. And yeah, good show.
Yep. So we'll see you guys next time.
Catch you on the flippity flip.
Hold on, let me see if I can. See you guys.